Alright guys, so the video for today, this is going to be one of those like uniquely police officer experience videos because when you become a police officer and you watch the news and you monitor the local media, you'll see a large number of stories that of incidents that you were actually there on, you participated in, you were maybe the arresting officer, and then you'll see a news article about that story and you're like, that's not right. Not only is that right, but everything they said is completely wrong. We're going to be talking about fake news today, and I've got a perfect example, and I have the proof of why it's fake news. That's what we're going to be going over today. Hang tight. I'm going to have fun with this one. Alright guys, so the story for today that we're going to go over and I'm going to be completely debunking for you. And this is going to be a perfect example of why when you watch the news, when you read the news, when you see headlines on Facebook, not only take them with a grain of salt, but you should look at them with a strong degree of skepticism, especially when it comes to crime stories. I guess that's my field of expertise, so that's something that I really want to address here. And the story is one that was posted on ABC6 Columbus's Facebook page and their web page. It was written by this person right here, Trinity Langbein. We're going with Langbein. Trinity, what you did in this article is you listened to a police scanner. You did not have the facts at all, and you went ahead and wrote an article as if you have some authority, as if you were there, as if you knew what you were talking about, and you didn't. Everything that you say in this article was wrong. You should be embarrassed. This is why people don't trust what they see in the news. So the headline of this particular subject, of this particular story, was carjacking suspect shot by would-be victim, police say. No. I'll read it again. Carjacking suspect shot by would-be victim. So if you see this headline, you see it on Facebook, which I've got their Facebook up here. It's got a lot of reactions. You know, a lot of people are excited, like, yeah, good guy with a gun. Someone tried to rob him. That thief got what he deserved. That's what this headline tells you, right? There was a guy just innocently sitting in his car, and then some thug came up to the car, like, yo, man, give me your car. And he's like, pow, pow. No, that is not what happened at all. So then the article is very short, so a few lines. It says a person was shot Wednesday morning during an attempted carjacking. Police say the male was shot while trying to steal a car in the 200 block of South Richardson Avenue. The victim, or the carjacking victim, reportedly tried to leave the scene after firing the shot, but later was located by police. The other thing I want to say about Trinity is your mastery of the English language is lacking. Did you go to journalism school or take English classes? The carjacking victim reportedly had tried to leave the scene after firing the shot. I think you could take the had out. See, what had happened was, that's not how you write articles. So they're saying that there was a guy sitting in his car and that somebody tried to carjack him. That guy had a weapon, shot the guy who tried to steal his car, and then the guy with the gun fled and was later apprehended. That's what the story says. The funny thing is, I was there. I was the first one there. I know what happened. That's not what happened. I can't just go around telling people what happened on scenes that I was at when that information is not public. So what I did was I waited until today, which is what the media should have done. And I called down to the Franklin County Clerk of Courts. I got the charging documents. I got the actual criminal complaint, and I got the statement of probable cause. And that's what we're going to read today. And this is going to be my source of information for y'all. So here is what the detective wrote. Remember before, we have a story about a carjacking victim who was armed, shot the suspect, and then ran. That's what the media reported. Here is the statement of facts by the detective. On June 28, 2023 at 9:53 a.m., Columbus Police patrol officers were dispatched to 204 South Richardson Avenue on a report that someone had been shot. Upon arrival, officers found Joseph Trickett suffering from a gunshot wound to his left elbow. Mr. Trickett was transported to Grant Hospital in stable condition and refused to provide a statement regarding the incident. Officers apprehended Mr. Robert Ellison at scene, who was cooperative with the investigation. Mr. Ellison was read his constitutional rights and decided to make a statement. He stated he received a tip that his stolen 2000 Buick LeSabre with Ohio tag, as it's written, was occupied by Mr. Trickett, a known associate in the alley in the rear of South Richardson Avenue. Mr. Ellison stated he located the vehicle occupied by Mr. Trickett and a female who he knew as Mariah Morrison and pointed a handgun at them, ordering them to get out of the vehicle. Mr. Ellison stated they ignored his commands, and then Mr. Trickett started to drive off. Mr. Ellison fired a single round at the vehicle, striking Mr. Trickett in the elbow. Mr. Ellison stated he was unsure if he fired the gun intentionally or accidentally, but stated he did not want to get struck by the vehicle. Video of the incident revealed Mr. Ellison leaned towards the vehicle as it drove by him, and that's when he fired his gun. Mr. Ellison was transported to Franklin County Jail for slating. So here is what really happened. This guy, Mr. Robert Ellison, had his car stolen a few days ago. He heard that his car was at a certain location and it was occupied by this guy named Joseph. Mr. Ellison knows Joseph, and he knows the female that was with Joseph, Miss Mariah. So Mr. Ellison grabs his gun and goes to where his stolen car is. He finds it occupied, and Joseph was in the driver's seat. He points his gun at him and says, "Get out of my car. That's mine. That doesn't belong to you." Joseph puts this Buick LeSabre, I think it was a LeSabre, in drive, starts to drive away. Mr. Ellison takes his gun, pop, fires off a round, striking Joseph in the elbow. Joseph drove a short time and was found by officers. He was then taken to the hospital. Mr. Ellison remained at scene and spoke to officers when they arrived. As a matter of fact, he still had his gun on his hip when officers arrived. He was taken into custody because he had just shot somebody. The investigation revealed, at least per this detective, that they believed that this was an act of felonious assault. It's right here. So he was charged and taken to jail. That is very different from the news story that was printed by ABC 6 that says a carjacking suspect was shot by a would-be victim. In this case, the carjacker was the guy who had his car stolen and was trying to get his car back. You're not allowed to shoot somebody for stealing your car. I'm sorry, but that's against the law. Now, I also want to get into how the media came up with this story. The way the media came up with the story is they were just listening to the police scanner when this incident happened. They sent some cameramen to scene, but they didn't talk to anybody on scene. I can assure you of that for multiple reasons. One being, officers on scenes generally just don't talk to reporters. They're not allowed to do that. It has to come through the Public Information Office. So they listened to this on the scanner. They sent some cameramen over to get some pictures and stuff, and then they wrote the article. When a shooting like this happens, this is a very chaotic scene. You had a guy going to recover his own stolen vehicle. The vehicle started to take off. He fired a shot at the guy. So the guy who fired the shot picked up his phone. He called 911. There were also multiple people in that neighborhood who called 911. They all saw something different. And their perspective when they called into dispatch, they all had different things to say. When the call was dispatched to the officers, the dispatcher's reading through all of the notes, and it's scattered all over the place. It's almost impossible to figure out what actually happened. The only thing that as an officer with this kind of situation is that there was a gunshot. Somebody shot at somebody. We don't know whether or not anybody was hurt, and it involves somebody fleeing. The way the information was called out over the radio, it made it sound like the suspect who fired the shot was the one that was running. That's why the media reported it this way, but that is actually not what happened. The person who fired the shot was the person whose car was stolen. He believed he was completely in the right in his actions, so he stayed at scene. The other thing was that as officers are pulling up, you're trying to get on the air. In this particular situation, I was that officer. I was the first one. I tried to get on the air and say something, and then the dispatcher spoke over me. A few minutes later, the dispatcher said, "Hey, do you have traffic?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm here. I'm talking to these people." And I didn't quite say it, but what I was trying to get the message across is stop airing the bullshit that's coming over 911 because it's not accurate. And I'm trying to get the most accurate information out there for the other officers and for the medics who are on their way to scene. As I'm walking up, there's a lot of people around. There's people standing up on boxes, looking over their fences, shouting at me. There's people walking around the alley. There's multiple cars back there. And I've got a guy standing there with a gun on his hip saying, I shot at somebody. And, you're trying to figure out what's going on. You got something about a stolen car. You got somebody that was shot at. You don't know if anyone was hit. So I grabbed my radio and I said, "Hey, right now we have someone that fired a round. We don't know if anybody was struck. And it looks like this is out of an attempt to steal a vehicle because the guy with the gun said he stole my car." So that's what I said over the air. We then start walking around, start talking to everybody. The guy who was actually shot turns up down the road. Officers take him into custody, call detectives. Detectives are like, "You know what? The guy who fired around, go ahead and secure him, bring him up to headquarters for an interview, and we'll sort all this out." That is what happens. And that is how the detective came up with this statement of facts. It's very different from what was written in this article because they don't actually have the facts. I feel like I'm starting to repeat myself, so I'm going to stop really soon. But I just want to kind of reiterate that when you see these stories about a local crime that happened, often the reporters are writing that story based solely on what they overheard on a police scanner. That information is sketchy at best because that's what, I've arrived on, I don't know, hundreds, if not thousands of shooting scenes in my career. And we just put out information as quick as we get it. Whatever I hear, I'll say, "Hey, I got to go over here that's saying this." And then someone else will say, "I got to go over here, a guy that's over here saying this." And then you'll have an officer that'll talk to both of those people and he'll kind of put two and two together and he'll say, "Hey, that information that was out earlier, that's not correct. Here's what we're looking for. Here's what we got." That information changes and evolves very quickly on a dispatch run. And then once things settle down and we're at the point where we're about to start setting up crime scene tape, that's when we actually sit people down, do a real interview, get the whole story. And at that point, we're no longer on our radios. We're talking to people face to face. We're writing up officer narratives. We're calling detectives on their cell phones, giving them that information. And none of that information is available to the public just because, at least not at that time, because it's not out there. You know what I mean? So the media doesn't have the real story when they publish it. The call that is dispatched and the initial information aired by officers more than half the time is not accurate. And that's what these people are writing their stories on. I think that's the moral of today's story. I would also recommend that ABC 6 take a look at Trinity here and maybe reconsider. I don't know if Trinity is a boy or a girl, but reconsider whether you're going to let this person publish on your website because they're publishing questionable stuff and their grammar is equally as questionable. I think those are going to be my thoughts for today. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you later.